Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. I am so glad you're here today. If today's story wasn't so well documented, it would be difficult to believe it's true, but it is. And if a federal prosecutor named Kat Dahl hadn't been assigned to this case, we would never have known this story. Because you see, the police in Johnson City, Tennessee were doing everything they could to cover it up. When this prosecutor refused to back down and realized that the cops were intentionally trying to get her to drop this case, she dug her heels in, and then she was fired. At the heart of this case is a true monster, a man who victimized women and children in the most disturbing ways imaginable. He then escaped and went on the run, living in an abandoned house for weeks, a house that was just blocks from the police station. The question is, how involved were the cops? This is a very disturbing story of how police officers were actively working to protect one of the most prolific predators ever discovered in Tennessee. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. It helps so much. Today we are talking about how the cops protected a predator. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. Our story begins in Johnson City, Tennessee, a small city of around 70,000 people that sits near the Rocky Mount Historic Site. The information I'm sharing with you today comes from an article published in The New Yorker. Federal prosecutor Kat Dahl was given a somewhat unusual assignment. Most of Kat's cases involved people charged with federal crimes, like possession of drugs or guns. She wasn't an experienced criminal investigator, someone who would handle things like assault and robbery. In November of 2020, Kat Dahl was called in to speak with the police supervisor, Thomas Sparks, and another officer named David Hilton. In that meeting, Kat was informed that she was being given a new assignment, and it was to look into this local businessman named Shawn Williams. Shawn is a 49-year-old glass and concrete contractor who specialized in restoring historical buildings. Shawn was known to be a somewhat colorful local character. In his office building was a garage where Shawn kept a red Ultima GTR sports car. He also commissioned a large painting of himself surrounded by giant cartoon breasts. Ew. Shawn lived in a 3,000 square foot condo a block from his business, and that house was locally known as a place where wild parties were thrown. Shawn kept things in his apartment like exotic reptiles, expensive drones, and toys, and it was very well known that he served his party guests not only copious amounts of alcohol, but cocaine, which he served from a large pepper grinder. Sounds like somebody's pretty desperate for attention. So as Kat sat in this meeting learning about her new assignment, she was told that at Shawn's apartment during one of his wild parties, a 32-year-old woman named Michaela Evans had a horrifying experience. Michaela and a friend of hers were hanging out, talking with Shawn Williams and his friend Alvaro Diaz. Michaela had only had a couple of beers and a single shot, but as she sat on a large swing in the apartment, she began to feel very strange. Shawn Williams was pushing Michaela on the swing and watching her intently. That's all she remembers. She doesn't know when, but at some point during the party, Michaela fell 5 stories from the window in Shawn Williams' apartment. The impact of her hitting the ground was so loud that people in a restaurant around the corner thought the noise was a gunshot. Michaela has no memory of the fall. The next thing she was aware of was waking up in a hospital bed more than a week later, where she was told that she'd been in a coma. She had more than a dozen broken bones and a fractured skull. Michaela learned that after she'd fallen, the police seized more than 200 rounds of ammunition found in Shawn Williams' apartment, which was a big problem because Shawn is a felon who is not allowed to own firearms or ammunition. He was convicted in the 90s for growing pot. Now, later on, it will come out that it's very strange the police only found ammunition, and there's a reason for that. We're going to talk about it. Kat Dahl was a 29-year-old special assistant U.S. attorney who had been working that job for about a year. Finding out the police were pursuing this case when they'd found ammunition but no firearm was unusual. Her office didn't usually press charges against a felon for having only ammunition. So Kat asked why the office was going after this man just for being in possession of ammunition, and that's when she was told by Thomas Sparks, "We think he's a rapist." So the police arrived at Shawn Williams' apartment after receiving many 911 calls from people who had seen Michaela fall, and when they were searching, they found a long strip of paper with a handwritten list on it. What was on the list? 22 first names, female first names, along with the word baby and no-name girl. At the top of the list was one underlined word: raped. The police also found a safe inside the apartment, and inside that safe, cops found a child's toy doll that was clearly being used as a sex toy. Wow. This was, of course, incredibly disturbing, so the cops began to look into who Shawn Williams was and discovered that 2 women had filed police reports against Shawn Williams, claiming he had sexually assaulted them. But those reports went nowhere. Kat Dahl, the prosecutor, was also told that area cops were well aware that Shawn Williams had a reputation in town for being a predatory dirtbag. That's the word that was used. Kat would later say that as she sat and absorbed this information, she had a gut feeling that this was a much bigger case than it appeared to be on the surface. She asked the police supervisors why they weren't pursuing rape charges against Shawn Williams. She asked if any other victims had been identified. The cops seemed totally uninterested in pursuing charges against Shawn. Kat also said they didn't seem to have any empathy for the women who were claiming to be victimized. In fact, one of the officers said something very shocking in this meeting about the victim, Michaela. Brian Hilton said, "She dressed like a real, well, I won't say it here," because we all know that what a woman is wearing defines whether or not she is assaulted. I mean, it is 2025. Kat knew something was not right here, and she told Thomas Sparks and Hilton, the man who made the comment, that she would look into the case as long as her investigation wasn't limited to just the ammunition charge. She wanted to look into the other allegations against Shawn Williams. Kat Dahl began looking into the women who'd made the allegations. She was able to identify more possible victims by speaking with those women. After some digging around, Kat went back to the police supervisors she was in contact with to report to them that she'd found some very troubling information, and the response she got set off more alarm bells. Kat said the cops were not interested at all. Her research findings fell on deaf ears. She was even made to feel as though she should make these allegations go away. Kat then pulled the police reports regarding the women who'd made complaints. She asked the officers involved why there had been no follow-up. She was told that the complainants didn't want to cooperate. Well, Kat knew that wasn't true because she had spoken with them. So this further bolstered her theory that something was amiss here. These women told Kat they were more than happy to cooperate with the police. But when she asked the police why nothing had been done, they said, well, the women didn't want to pursue it. We got red flags all over the place. Kat began to dig around and learned the stories of the victims. In November of 2019, a woman named Brianna Pack, then 22, was drinking at a bar near Shawn Williams' apartment when she and her friend ran into Shawn's friend, Alvaro Diaz. Alvaro invited the women back to Shawn's apartment, and when they got there, Shawn gave each of the women a beer. As soon as she'd finished her beer, Brianna Pack began to feel groggy. She told Shawn and Alvaro that she wanted to leave, but the men wouldn't let her. The next thing Brianna remembers is sitting on a bar stool in the apartment. The next morning, she woke up in Shawn Williams' bed with no idea how she'd gotten there. Ugh. Brianna's friend was gone. Brianna had a different friend of hers drive her to an urgent care clinic where a drug test was performed. She had a high dosage of benzodiazepines in her blood, and those were drugs she had not knowingly taken. Brianna then went to the hospital for a rape kit. After that, Brianna contacted the Johnson City Police, where an officer told her, quote, "Other women have reported similar things at that apartment. We know exactly who this guy is. Okay, then why aren't you doing anything? Brianna told the cops she was working with that she would do whatever she needed to do to assist them in pressing charges against Shawn Williams, but she heard nothing back. A week went by, and then 3. Brianna began calling the police department asking for follow-up communication. No one would return her phone calls. Brianna got the results of her rape kit back. She found out that male DNA was present. She called the police and let them know, gave them a copy of the report. Still, they did nothing. Brianna claims that in one conversation with Toma Sparks, Toma told Brianna that Shawn Williams was, quote, untouchable. Kat found a second allegation made by a 22-year-old woman in June of 2020. Again, this woman was drinking at a bar when she and her friend ran into Alvaro Diaz. And again, they went back to Shawn Williams' apartment. This woman was also offered a drink. And again, she lost consciousness, waking up around 3:30 that morning with Shawn Williams on top of her. The woman jumped up, screaming, and called 911. The police arrived minutes later to find this woman running from the building crying. The officers took the woman home because she didn't want to go to the hospital, and then 2 weeks later, the woman gave an official statement. The police wrote in the report that this had been an attempted rape and that the woman did not want to pursue charges because she had learned her lesson. I can feel the rage building. As Kat Dahl read these reports, she could see a major problem. The cops were not doing anything about this known predator. She started to wonder, what does this guy have on the police? Then Kat dove deeper into the reports of Michaela Evans' fall. She learned that on the night Michaela fell from the apartment, an officer named Justin Jenkins arrived at the scene, but acquiesced to Shawn Williams' demands that the police leave and return with a warrant. The police don't need a warrant at a potential crime scene. A woman has just fallen from this specific apartment's window. That is a potential crime scene. It is definitely the scene of an accident, and police do not need a warrant there. But Kat read with her own eyes in the report that the police left because Shawn Williams wanted them to go and get a warrant. Why did this officer allow Shawn to shoo him away and out of the apartment? Well, remember me saying they only found ammunition in the apartment? It was well known that Shawn's apartment always had drugs in it. They didn't find any drugs. It was known that Shawn Williams' apartment always had a large amount of cash in it. They didn't find any cash. Did some of that cash go in a police officer's pocket to go away? Kat Dahl learned that even though the apartment building and surrounding buildings had cameras on them, no police officers made an effort to procure footage of Michaela's fall from any of those cameras. I mean, that is just unbelievable. The cops also failed to take Shawn Williams' phone from him, and he was seen by others accessing the camera footage from an app on his phone. So he went into the camera app from the cameras on his building and deleted footage before the cops could get to it. Not that they were trying very hard, they didn't even ask for his phone. Like I said, it would be hard to believe all of this if it wasn't so well documented. When I first heard this story, I hesitated to post about it. But then when the New Yorker came out with its article, it was very detailed and they had vetted all of the sources. I feel more comfortable talking about it because so much of this information has been confirmed by well-known journalists. I was nervous to talk about this story because it just seems too much to believe. As a result of the police leaving the apartment to go and get a warrant, Shawn Williams and Alvaro Diaz were left in the apartment for several hours unsupervised. Shawn even later told friends that a cop friend of his was keeping tabs on the warrant situation, and this friend called to let Shawn know when the officers were headed back to his apartment. So they had ample time to get rid of drugs, to get rid of cash, to get rid of guns. The more Kat Dahl looked into this case, the worse it got. She realized that the police had made a series of blunders or intentional oversights. Anytime a cop wrote up a report on Shawn Williams, it was vague and undefined. Evidence was never properly secured. It was almost as if they were trying to make any case against Shawn Williams unprosecutable. And then other women began to come forward. A woman named Kaylee Murray went to a Halloween party at Shawn Williams' apartment. She took a drink from him, and minutes later, she lost consciousness. Her next memory was waking up with Shawn Williams on top of her, totally naked. Kaylee said she was so badly affected by this event that her mental health declined and she lost custody of her 2 kids. In early 2020, Shawn Williams contacted Kaylee, and during what she calls the darkest period of her life, she began talking to him. After a few conversations, the two met up, and Shawn offered Kaylee a line of cocaine. After she snorted it, she passed out. She woke up with Shawn on top of her, holding her down and trying to penetrate her. Kaylee fought back and got Shawn off her, and then she snuck out of the apartment after he passed out. Kaylee then contacted the FBI because she didn't trust the Johnson City Police. The FBI alerted Thomas Sparks, who was the Johnson City Police. Thomas Sparks told Kaylee she would look into the attack, and Kaylee never heard another word. She still hasn't. Months into her investigation, Kat Dahl realized she was not going to get anywhere, so she reached out to her supervisor at the Department of Justice, a man named Wayne Taylor, who scheduled a meeting between Kat Dahl and officials with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. When Carl Turner, the chief of police, found out about this meeting, he threw a fit, and the meeting was canceled. Kat then met with the police chief, and she was told by Turner, quote, "I don't know if that's girls he's raped or girls he's had consensual sex with, and he calls it whatever he calls it." What does that even mean? Kat told the officer she was concerned that Shawn Williams was preying on children. They had found this baby doll in the safe that was... Kat never got any response to her concerns. She had no follow-up. She had no support. And she knew full well that she was now considered an outsider at the Johnson City Police Department and that no one would be cooperating with her investigation. Kat says she became the subject of jokes at the department and even had a colleague say to her, quote, "If you're so obsessed with this case, why don't you go have a drink at Label, which is the bar where Shawn preyed upon women, and let him take you up to his apartment, then give us a call." Hey. Kat became convinced that the only way to go at Shawn Williams was via the ammunition charge, and in April of 2021, she did just that. Shawn Williams was indicted by a grand jury, but Kat couldn't get any of the Johnson City police officers to arrest him. So the guy gets indicted, but not arrested. Kat was given different excuses. The officers were busy. They had conflicting schedules. Williams just wasn't a priority. Kat was shocked. And again, this just further convinced the prosecutor that there was much more going on here than it appeared. Finally, in May of 2021, weeks after his indictment, an officer was sent to arrest Shawn Williams, but only after Kat continued to put pressure on the police. At the time of his arrest, Shawn was in the middle of one of his parties. When Shawn saw the cops outside his door, he fled the apartment by rappelling out of a window. The cops did not chase him down. They didn't pursue him, and no arrest was made. So at this point, it becomes very clear the police are protecting this known predator. Kat Dahl becomes convinced that the only reason she was brought in on the ammunition charge was so the police department could cover its ass, say they were doing something about this guy without actually doing anything at all. And then, a month later, Kat Dahl was called into the office and fired. Somewhere along the way, Shawn Williams was arrested and he was set to go to trial 2 months later. But why would the prosecutor who'd brought him to trial be fired? Why would they fire this woman right before the person she's been chasing is set to go to trial? The whole thing stinks. Weeks later, in July of 2021, Kat Dahl wrote an encrypted email to The New Yorker using a fake name. She told the reporter who would eventually break this story, Ronan Farrow, quote, "Worst case scenario, I believe there is a possibility that this person is being protected by local law enforcement. All I want is some accountability in this case." Now, Kat Dahl continued to live in Johnson City, and she felt like she had a target on her back. The cops hated her, but she was now also out of a job. Even with all that stress, she was not finished with this case. Kat kept in contact with the women who had made allegations against Shawn Williams, and she learned about more victims. Kat would often meet these women for dinner and drinks, and it was during one of these meetings that Kat learned something she'd never heard before. A woman told Kat that there was a girl partying at Shawn Williams' apartment one night who'd gotten into some kind of accident and then died after leaving his apartment. Kat was shocked to hear this, and she went into research mode. She found out that a woman named Laura Shea Trent had died in a car accident in November of 2020. Kat reached out to Laura's sister, Sarah, who had quite the story to tell. Sarah said that on the night Laura died, she and her boyfriend, Laura and her boyfriend, Noah Sedum, had briefly stopped by Shawn Williams' garage for a few drinks. Laura's boyfriend, Noah, was friends with Shawn Williams. Laura and Noah had a drink inside Shawn's garage and then went to their car. Noah realized he'd left his phone inside the garage and went back to get it. When he got back to the parking lot, Laura and her car were gone. Noah began calling Laura's phone but got no answer. He got into another car and started driving around looking for Laura but couldn't find her. Sarah then got a hold of her sister Laura, but Laura was incoherent and couldn't describe where she was at. Sarah is convinced that her sister was drugged. And then Laura stopped responding altogether. Minutes later, she crashed her car into a concrete traffic island, dying at the scene of a crash. Kat asked Sarah, did the police do a toxicology report? Sarah said yes, it showed alcohol, but they did no rape kit or drug testing. 2 days after Laura died, Sarah called the Johnson City Police Department to tell them that she believes her sister Laura had been raped inside Shawn Williams' apartment. Some of the things that Laura said on the phone before her death were not adding up. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know what car she was driving. So she had been given something. Sarah was told that Johnson City didn't have jurisdiction on the case. And so Sarah began calling the police in Elizabethtown, where the crash happened. That police department sent her back to Johnson City, where Sarah then hit a brick wall. Kat Dahl began to really look into who Shawn Williams was. He'd grown up mainly in North Carolina and fathered a daughter when he was a teenager. At just 14, Shawn went into foster care and spent the rest of his childhood moving from home to home, where he was known to be a runaway. Then, this is so disturbing, Shawn Williams began having sex with one of his foster mothers, which led to her divorce. At 18, Shawn began a relationship with a 35-year-old woman. They began growing pot and started a high-rise building window washing service. The company was successful, and Shawn made a lot of money. He also got deeper into the world of drug dealing until he was finally arrested in the late 90s. That's why he was a felon. After Shawn was indicted on these new charges in 2021, he was able to put his trial off for 2 years. Kat Dahl even tried getting the U.S. Marshals involved. She said it just never went anywhere. Every time she tried to get another agency to assist, she felt like she hit a brick wall. Shawn put his apartment up for sale, and if you think this whole thing isn't already sketchy as hell, the city manager, Kat Dahl, tried to buy it. Kat Dahl is over the police department. That's part of her job. Kathy would later claim that the home inspection on the apartment came up with too many issues for her to purchase it. But by Kathy entering the contract to purchase this apartment, it tied the house up for months and gave her access to it. What was going on in that apartment for months? Why would the city manager try to buy a known drug-dealing predator's apartment? Was that apartment being cleaned? Was it being remodeled because there had been something there that people didn't want found? In the midst of all of this, Shawn Williams then disappeared. For a year, police claimed they looked for Shawn Williams. Around 2 a.m. on April 29, 2023, a security guard for Western California University found Shawn sleeping in his car. Inside the car, Shawn had 12 ounces of cocaine, 14 ounces of methamphetamine, $100,000 in cash, and multiple hard drives. He was arrested and taken into custody finally. The cops began to go through the hard drives and found exactly what Kat Dahl was afraid of. There were thousands of videos and images that depicted crimes against 67 victims, many of them drugged and unconscious. Several of the victims were confirmed to be minors. And then the cops found the hard drive full of child. Cops found thousands of images of child and video as well. And these were not just any images. Shawn Williams was the perpetrator in the acts being filmed and photographed. This man, who Kat Dahl had been so desperately trying to bring attention to, had a minimum of 67 confirmed victims, and that's just what police found on the hard drives. That makes Shawn Williams one of the most prolific serial rapists in American history. This man was right under their noses, and not only did the Johnson City cops know about him, they had a federal prosecutor hounding them to do something about him, and they did absolutely nothing. Finally, Shawn Williams was in custody, charged with multiple counts related to child and to possession and intent to distribute meth and coke. More than 20 charges involving child sex abuse would come at a later date. Kat Dahl and Shawn's victims finally breathed a sigh of relief, but this guy was far from under control. In July of 2023, Shawn Williams attempted to dig his way out of his jail cell in Jonesboro, Tennessee. After he was caught for that, the jailers began keeping a closer eye on him. Months later, in October, Shawn was being transferred in a jail van for a court appearance. As they traveled, Shawn lifted a loose portion of the vehicle's wall paneling and snapped off a metal clip that was holding it in place. He used that clip to pick the locks of his handcuffs and belly chain, and then kicked out a window in this van, which, surprise, surprise, was missing the metal security bars it should have been outfitted with. He squeezed through the window and jumped from the van, breaking his wrist. This seemed deliberate. There were too many things that went wrong for this to be coincidence, and many people remain convinced that someone inside the police department was helping Shawn escape. Oh, and by the way, the security camera inside the van wasn't working either. There are stories that we do hear sometimes where I'm like, they really just think we're all idiots. They really do. The FBI was brought in along with helicopters and sniffer dogs. Shawn Williams ran to hide in an abandoned house just a few blocks from the courthouse. But the dogs couldn't find him? The initial search failed to find Shawn, and days passed. He jimmy-rigged like a pulley system that he used to hoist himself in and out of the house's attic without being noticed, and he lived on walnuts from a tree in the yard and drank water from a neighbor's hose. He found some old videotapes in the abandoned house, so he rigged an electrical siphon and stole power from one of the neighbors' houses so he could watch movies as he hid. And one of the movies that he watched over and over was The Fugitive. Shawn began stealing tools and knives to work on an old abandoned truck he found in the neighborhood. He knew that if he could get that truck running, he could get out of the area. And remember, he owned a garage. He claims he found someone's pot stash and sold it to earn money while he was on the run. If you ask others involved, the pot was Shawn's. He had stashed it somewhere nearby and then dug it up to sell it. Shawn got the truck working, and when he did, he drove to North Carolina to see his daughter, Kari Dills, who is now in her 30s. Shawn then took off to Florida, where he holed up in Largo. He wandered around an old neighborhood he'd lived in, and even went to see the handprints that he'd left in concrete as a child. And then, on November 20th, 2023, Shawn Williams' getaway truck was found by a local cop. The cop raised the alarms and a manhunt ensued. Shawn ran to a nearby lake and hid under a canoe as the area was searched. They didn't find him, and the next day, Shawn walked into a 7-Eleven to buy a hot dog. When he went to pay, the clerk recognized him from a police photo circulating in the area. As soon as Shawn was out of the store, this clerk called 911. The area was immediately swarming with cops. Shawn Williams tried to duck under a tarp near a walking trail, but the police sent in their dog Voodoo, who sank its teeth into Shawn's arm, and he was finally back in custody. Shawn started making allegations against the Johnson City cops, saying some of them were in on his criminal activities. Shawn claims that when the officers went through his apartment on the night Michaela fell from the window, the cops themselves took hundreds of thousands of dollars from his safe, along with drugs. Shawn claims that he has been paying off the local cops in Johnson City for years, using his ex-girlfriend, Alunda Rutherford, as a mule to get cash to the cops that he was bribing. Shawn Williams also claims that some of the Johnson City cops were being paid to look the other way as he sex trafficked women and girls from his apartment and his business. As Shawn Williams sat in jail awaiting trial, 9 victims of sexual assault filed a civil lawsuit against the Johnson City Police Department. This then grew to a class action lawsuit alleging police corruption, which forced the Johnson City PD to produce private financial records on some of its officers, like their own private banking records. The plaintiffs' attorneys claim to have found financial inconsistencies in many Johnson City police officers' financial records. That part of the case is still under investigation. In June of 2022, with Shawn Williams still on the run, Kat Dahl sued Turner and the Johnson City Police Department for retaliation and wrongful termination. A trial date has not yet been set on this matter. A federal lawsuit has also been filed by Shawn Williams' accusers, stating that Johnson City officers, including Thomas Sparks, took money from Shawn Williams and his ex-girlfriend, and that officers were involved in bribes and sex trafficking. A month ago, Johnson City agreed to a $28 million settlement with victims of sexual violence. Journalists believe the city agreed to pay this massive settlement in order to stop a deeper investigation that would reveal massive corruption at the city and state level. Shawn Williams went to trial in February. He was on his 4th attorney by then. He is apparently very difficult. During sentencing, he was on his 5th attorney. Evidence was presented proving that Shawn Williams had assaulted a boy just months old, a 4-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. Oh my goodness. He used their mothers to get access to the children. Judge Ronnie Greer called Shawn Williams a psychopath and a dangerous predator. In the end, this monster was sentenced to 95 years for production of child and escape from custody. He will never leave prison. The fact that we have not heard more about this story is very telling. Kat Dahl has vowed to continue investigating this case, even though it cost her her job. This woman is a hero, and without her, this maniac would still be loose, victimizing women and children. I will keep you updated on her lawsuit as it progresses. To the victims of Shawn Williams, we send our love from the Dark Hearts community. We hope you are healing and that you feel more safe with this man behind bars. And to the Johnson City officers involved in this story, I would need another half hour to say what I'd like to say to you. Gonna be an interesting one to watch. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you'd like to see more from me, and a special thank you to my patrons. If you join my Patreon, you will get some bonus content that you cannot see or hear anywhere else. This is my podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify, and I post brand new episodes every Monday and Wednesday. Don't forget about our fundraisers. There's a playlist on my channel called Fundraisers. If you've got an extra $5 laying around, we have some really great causes that you can help with. I sure hope you're well, my friends. I hope you're enjoying the summer and managing to stay sane with everything going on. I love you guys, and I truly appreciate your friendship. Stay safe and be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.